Billionaire freezes. The moment he sees who's driving, it's the professor he ruined. But how did the man who once built his future end up here, driving for scraps? The rain hammers against the windshield of a beat-up Honda Civic as it pulls up to the gleaming towers of Manhattan's financial district. In the back seat, a man in a $3,000 suit checks his Rolex. Ethan Cross. 38 years old. Net worth, $2.7 billion. He barely glances up from his phone as he slides into the Uber. Just another ride. Just another driver. But then the driver speaks. You know, Ethan, I always wondered what happened to that brilliant kid who used to sit in the front row of my philosophy of ethics class. Ethan's fingers freeze over his screen. His blood turns to ice. Slowly, he lifts his head and sees the reflection in the rearview mirror. Salt and pepper beard. Kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. A face he hasn't seen in 15 years. Professor David Chun. The man who once told him that success without integrity is just elaborate failure. The same man now driving him to a board meeting where Ethan plans to destroy 3,000 jobs to save his quarterly profits. What happens next? Either of them saw coming. The silence in that car becomes deafening. Ethan stares at the back of his former professor's head, watching as David's weathered hands grip the steering wheel with the same gentle confidence he once used to hold chalk. Professor Chun? Ethan's voice cracks like he's 22 again. David glances in the rearview mirror. A sad smile crosses his face. It's just David now. Has been for quite some time. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Just David. Not Professor Chun. Not the man who shaped hundreds of young minds at Columbia University. Not the philosopher who made Aristotle feel like a best friend and made ethics seem like the most important subject in the world. Just an Uber driver. 15 years ago, Ethan Cross was nobody. A kid from Queens with holes in his sneakers and dreams bigger than his bank account. He'd take the subway 2 hours each way just to sit in Professor Chen's classroom, hanging on every word like gospel. Flashback. A younger Ethan sits in the front row, notebook filled with frantic scribbles. Professor Chen paces in front of a packed lecture hall, his voice carrying that perfect balance of authority and warmth. What is the true measure of a man's success? The professor had asked. Is it the size of his bank account? The power he wields? Or is it simpler than that? Is it how many people are better off because he existed? Back then, Ethan raised his hand with the eagerness of someone who believed in answers. Who believed in right and wrong. Who believed that money and morality could coexist. But that was before. Before the startup. Before the IPO. Before the Forbes covers and the penthouse apartments, and the way money changes everything it touches. I thought you were still teaching, Ethan says quietly, watching the city blur past the rain-streaked windows. David merges into traffic with practiced ease. Budget cuts. They eliminated the entire philosophy department 3 years ago. Apparently, ethics doesn't drive enrollment numbers. The irony isn't lost on either of them. Philosophy cut for being unprofitable. By a university that now bears the name of Ethan's company on its new business school. I had no idea, Ethan whispers. And he means it. For all his billions, for all his connections, he somehow missed the destruction of the place that made him who he is. Or who he used to be. Why would you? There's no bitterness in David's voice. Just acceptance. You've been busy building an empire. I've been busy trying to pay rent. Ethan's phone buzzes. Stock price alerts. Meeting reminders. The machinery of capitalism demanding his attention. But for the first time in years, he ignores it. How long have you been driving? He asks. 2 years, 4 months, 13 days. David doesn't hesitate. He's counted. Turns out, a PhD in philosophy and 30 years of teaching experience doesn't qualify you for much in the modern economy. But it does teach you humility. The words hang in the air like a challenge. Humility. When was the last time Ethan felt humble? When was the last time he felt anything beyond the next deal, the next acquisition, the next victory? Another flashback. Professor Chen hands back a paper to young Ethan. An A-. Your analysis is brilliant, the professor had said. But you're missing something crucial. You write about success as if it's a zero-sum game. As if someone else has to lose for you to win. But what if that's the lie we tell ourselves to justify the harm we cause? Young Ethan had argued back then. Defended capitalism. Defended ambition. Defended the dream of making it big. Money isn't evil, Professor. Poverty is. Professor Chen had smiled sadly. Money isn't evil, Ethan. But what we're willing to sacrifice for it sometimes is. Now, sitting in the back of his former professor's Honda Civic, Ethan realizes he never really understood what David was trying to teach him. The irony cuts deeper than he expected. The man who taught him about ethics driving the man who forgot them. The professor who spoke about dignity working a job that society has decided has none. But what Ethan doesn't know yet is that this ride will change everything. Because David Chen has been watching. He's been waiting. And he's about to show his former student that the real lesson is just beginning. Traffic slows to a crawl as they approach Midtown. What should have been a 15-minute ride stretches into something longer. Something more dangerous. Because time, Ethan is beginning to realize, is the one thing his money can't buy back. I followed your career, you know, David says, navigating through a maze of yellow cabs and delivery trucks. The fintech startup. The algorithmic trading platform. Very impressive. There's something in his tone that makes Ethan's chest tighten. Not admiration. Something else. You always were the smartest kid in my class, David continues. I used to tell my wife about you. The one who would change the world. Ethan's phone buzzes again. This time he can't ignore it. A text from his CFO. Emergency board meeting moved up. Brookhaven Industries announcement cannot wait. Stock is bleeding. Brookhaven Industries. The manufacturing company Ethan's firm acquired 6 months ago. 3 factories. 3,000 employees. 3,000 families depending on paychecks that Ethan is about to eliminate with the stroke of a pen. Change the world, Ethan repeats quietly. I guess I did. Yes, David says. You did. The rain pounds harder against the windshield. Through the blur, Ethan can see the tower where his office sits on the 47th floor. Where men in expensive suits are waiting to applaud him for maximizing shareholder value. Where the language of business sanitizes the reality of human cost. Do you remember the trolley problem? David asks suddenly. Of course Ethan remembers. The famous ethical thought experiment. A runaway trolley heading toward 5 people tied to the tracks. You can pull a lever to divert it to another track, but that will kill 1 person instead of 5. Do you pull the lever? Do you choose to actively cause 1 death to prevent 5? Philosophy 101, Ethan says. Pull the lever. Save 5 lives by sacrificing 1. Utilitarian calculus. That's what you said then too. David's eyes meet his in the rearview mirror. You were so certain. So confident in your mathematics of morality. Ethan shifts uncomfortably. It's logical. The greatest good for the greatest number. Is it? David merges into the left lane. What if the 1 person is a brilliant surgeon who will save hundreds of lives? What if the 5 are criminals? What if you don't have all the information? What if the act of choosing makes you responsible for a death in a way that letting it happen doesn't? Philosophy professor to the end, Ethan says, but there's no humor in it. No, David replies quietly. Uber driver. But some questions follow you no matter where you go. Another text. This one from the Wall Street Journal. Cross Industries under investigation for predatory acquisition practices. Sources say internal emails reveal systematic targeting of vulnerable companies. Ethan's blood runs cold. Those emails. Those private communications where he and his team discussed Brookhaven's weaknesses. How they engineered the acquisition. How they planned to strip the assets and eliminate the workforce from day one. Something wrong? David asks, noticing Ethan's reaction in the mirror. Just business. Ah. David nods knowingly. The trolley problem isn't theoretical for you anymore, is it? The question hits like a punch to the gut. Because David is right. In 90 minutes, Ethan will walk into that boardroom and pull the lever. Sacrifice 3,000 jobs to save his company's quarterly numbers. Save the stock price by destroying lives. Flashback, a heated classroom debate from 15 years ago. But Professor, young Ethan had argued, sometimes you have to make hard choices. Sometimes people get hurt so that more people can benefit. That's just reality. Professor Chen had looked at him with those same kind, sad eyes. The danger, Ethan, isn't in making hard choices. It's in how easy they become. Now, sitting in traffic, Ethan realizes how prophetic those words were. When did destroying lives become a line item on a spreadsheet? When did 3,000 people become a number instead of families? I saw the news about Brookhaven, David says quietly. Ethan's head snaps up. What news? The acquisition? The planned restructuring? The layoffs? David's voice remains steady, almost clinical. 3,000 people about to lose their jobs so that Cross Industries can maintain its profit margins. How do you? I drive a lot of people, Ethan. Wall Street executives. Reporters. Brookhaven employees who don't know their boss yet that they're about to be unemployed. David pauses at a red light. I hear things. The silence stretches between them like a chasm. Ethan wants to defend himself. To explain the complexity of modern business. To justify the unjustifiable with the language of necessity. But looking at David, really looking at him, Ethan sees something that stops him cold. This isn't the broken man he expected. This isn't someone defeated by circumstance. This is someone who chose his dignity over his comfort. Someone who lost everything but kept his integrity intact. You think I'm a monster, Ethan says. No, David replies as the light turns green. I think you're lost. There's a difference. Another flashback, Professor Chen's final lecture of the semester. The philosophers speak of the examined life, he had said. But examination requires more than intelligence. It requires courage. The courage to look at yourself honestly. The courage to admit when you're wrong. The courage to change. Young Ethan had scribbled notes frantically, thinking he understood. Thinking courage was about taking risks with money, with business ventures, with career moves. He never realized that the greatest courage would be admitting that everything he built was wrong. But what happens next will test both men in ways neither expected. Because David Chen has been preparing for this moment longer than Ethan knows. And the lesson he's about to teach his former student will cost them both more than they ever imagined. They pull up to Cross Tower, its glass facade reflecting the storm clouds above like a mirror of moral ambiguity. David puts the car in park but doesn't unlock the doors. Not yet. Ethan, he says, turning around to face his former student directly. What if I told you there was another way? Ethan looks up from his phone, where 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages demand his attention. Another way to what? To save your company without destroying those families. To pull the lever in a different direction. For a moment, hope flickers in Ethan's chest. The same hope he felt 20 years ago when David would present an impossible ethical dilemma and then reveal a third option nobody had considered. I'm listening. David reaches into his glove compartment and pulls out a manila folder. Thick. Official looking. The kind of folder that changes everything. Sustainable restructuring, David says. Executive compensation cuts. Gradual workforce transition. Retraining programs. I've been working on it for 3 months. Ethan stares at the folder like it might explode. Working on it? How could you possibly? Because I wasn't just driving random passengers, Ethan. I was driving your employees. Your competitors. Your suppliers. Learning your business from the ground up. David's smile is sharp, knowing. Amazing what people will tell their Uber driver. The folder lands in Ethan's lap with the weight of revelation. Inside, detailed financial projections, alternative restructuring plans, sustainable business models that save both the company and the jobs. This is... Ethan flips through pages of meticulous research. This is brilliant. This could actually work. Of course it could work. I didn't stop being smart when I started driving a car. Ethan looks up, shame flooding his features. David, I could hire you back. Hell, I could hire you as chief ethics officer. Full salary, benefits, everything. We could implement this together. For the first time during the ride, David laughs. Not bitterly. Not sadly. With genuine amusement. Oh, Ethan. You still don't understand, do you? Understand what? David reaches for his phone, scrolls through his contacts, and shows Ethan the screen. A number saved under. Margaret Harrison, CEO. Margaret Harrison. CEO of Hartwell Industries. Cross Industries' biggest competitor. Ethan's world tilts sideways. You're working for them. I'm working with them. There's a difference. David pockets his phone. Margaret was one of my students too. Philosophy 303. Advanced Ethics. She graduated 2 years before you. The revelation hits like a physical blow. While Ethan was busy becoming everything David warned against, another student was building something different. Something better. She reached out 6 months ago when she heard about my situation. Offered me a position as Director of Ethical Business Practices. I turned her down initially. Told her I was done with corporate America. But then I started driving. Started listening. Started learning about companies like yours that treat human beings like spreadsheet entries. David's voice hardens. So I called her back. Ethan's mind races. The acquisition? Brookhaven. You've been feeding information to Hartwell? No. That would be unethical. David's smile is razor sharp. But helping Brookhaven's employees understand their options. Connecting them with companies that value their skills? Providing them with resources for their transition? That's just good citizenship. The folder in Ethan's lap suddenly feels different. Not a gift. A mirror. A reflection of what his company could be if he had the courage to change. Margaret is announcing a partnership with Brookhaven this afternoon. David continues. A joint venture that preserves every job while expanding their manufacturing capabilities. She's been planning it for months. Ethan's phone explodes with notifications. Stock alerts. Emergency messages. The market responding to rumors that are apparently already becoming reality. She's stealing my acquisition. She's saving 3,000 families. The two men stare at each other across the gulf of 15 years and a million moral choices. Teacher and student. Past and present. What was and what could have been. Why show me this? Ethan asked quietly. Why give me the folder if you're already working with my competitor? David's expression softens. Because I still believe in that kid who sat in my front row. The one who wanted to change the world for the better, not just change it. Rain continues to streak down the windows, blurring the world outside into impressionist watercolors. Inside the car, two men sit with the weight of choices that will ripple through thousands of lives. The trolley problem, David says quietly. You know what the real lesson was? Tell me. Sometimes the right choice isn't about pulling the lever or not pulling it. Sometimes the right choice is getting off the tracks entirely. Finding a different way. Refusing to accept that someone has to die. Ethan clutches the folder, his knuckles white. Inside those pages is a roadmap to redemption. A way to save his company and his soul. But it would require admitting he was wrong. It would require humility. It would require becoming the man his professor always believed he could be. "There's a board meeting in 40 minutes, Ethan says. "I know. If I walk in there with this plan, you'll save your company and 3,000 jobs. You'll also have to explain why you didn't think of it yourself. Why it took your Uber driver to solve the problem you created." Ethan opens the car door. Rain immediately soaks his expensive suit, but he doesn't care. He turns back to David, folder clutched against his chest like armor. "Professor?" "Yes?" "Thank you." David nods once, slowly. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you've earned it." Ethan starts to close the door, then stops. One more question burns in his throat. The investigation. The Wall Street Journal. How did they? David's smile is enigmatic. "I told you, Ethan. I drive a lot of people, including investigative journalists who are very interested in corporate ethics violations." The door closes with a soft click. Through the rain-streaked window, Ethan watches his former professor drive away, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the storm. In his hands, he holds more than a folder. He holds a choice. Pull the lever and destroy lives for profit, or find another way. Honor the man who taught him about ethics, or become another cautionary tale about power corrupting absolutely. As he walks toward the tower that bears his name, Ethan Cross realizes that his most important exam was never in a classroom. It's happening right now. And for the first time in 15 years, he's not sure he knows the right answer. But he's finally asking the right questions. The camera pulls back as Ethan disappears into the glass tower, folder in hand, the rain washing over everything like a baptism. In the distance, David's Honda Civic merges into traffic, carrying its driver toward whatever comes next. Because sometimes the most profound lessons happen not in lecture halls, but in the space between who we were and who we choose to become. And sometimes the teacher learns as much as the student. The end. Success isn't about how high you rise. It's about who you lift up along the way.